Hi everyone, Pastor Steve here from Plumpton Community Church. We're continuing on with our series about the Christian worldview versus the secular humanist worldview, the worldview that predominates most people's thinking in the Western nations today, even though many people are not aware of it, even in the church, has infiltrated into the church. I'm going to read out 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4 and 5 for you. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments, and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Okay, so the last video that I did, I talked a little bit about different forms of government, that we live in under a democracy, and then there's communist governments like China and North Korea, and there are other governments which would be called socialist governments like Venezuela, and the differences between those forms of government. In the Western nations, technically, we have freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom of movement and so forth, and in the communist countries like China and North Korea and other places, that freedom is not like what we have. It's more oppressive, and they're more controlled. In Venezuela, they are working with a model of socialism, which is a soft sell type of communism, if you like. They may have more freedom in that particular country, but the form of government, socialism, has completely wrecked the economy of that particular nation, which was once quite wealthy and well off, and now it's a poor area there. So what is secular humanism doing in places like, say, for instance, Australia and America, Britain, and places like that? I call it left-wing politics. It's invaded our universities and our educational system. It's invaded, obviously, our politics. There are political parties within the Western nations, like in Australia and America, that are leaning very heavily towards left-wing politics, towards socialism, which tends to lead to communism in its harder sell eventually. Our media is very much towards the left by and large. There are some that are not, but most of the mainstream media is very left-wing and sold out on this secular humanism, or political correctness, as we would call it mostly today. Of course, our education system has been infiltrated by it as well. And the idea behind all this stuff with secular humanism in all these different arenas, in politics and school and education and every area of Western life, is to remove the influence of the church, to even remove the influence of the parents. So it's one of its goals is to pull family apart compared to what traditional values would have as a family in the past. It's remove the influence of family, and to destroy the moral values that we've upheld. Most of the Western world was built on the Bible, the rule of law and the 10 Commandments and stuff like that. Well, that is all sort of up for grabs now, and it's basically already been removed from most people's reference, a form of living their life. They don't reference to it anymore. It's even infiltrating the churches. There are some churches that have sold out to secular humanism at some level already in many Western countries. But they know, the people that are pushing this stuff, that to actually win the day, they have to remove the voice of the church, or silence it, or get a hold of it. Like in some communist countries, the churches that they have there, that they have allowed to stay open, or in Soviet Russia and in China and places like that, they are controlled by the government and not by the Bible and the Word of God, or not by God himself. They're controlled by the government of that particular country that they belong to at some level. So Richard Wurmbrand was a pastor in Romania under the communist powers, and he wrote a pamphlet which is up on the church Facebook, Plumpton Community Church Facebook, And some of the things that he wrote about in the 1970s is what we're seeing happening today, where they are wanting to infiltrate the educational system, the political system, the churches, to eradicate family norms. All these things we've seen happen in our time. They've already happened. They are happening. And that's why it's important for us as Christians to understand these things. That verse that I led with, we need to be able to cast down those arguments and those things that have lifted themselves up against God. And if we don't do it, who will? If not now, when? It's the church that has been called to promote the truth, bring the gospel, and to uphold truth in all areas of life. And we have a job to do, and that's why I do these little videos, just because I want the church to grow and be strong, and for our families to have a future, and democracy and freedom to last, the way that it has done for my whole life, because the alternatives are a dictatorship, and nobody wants that. God bless. I'm Pastor Steve.